Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today in the group. So for those who don't know me yet, my name is Hélène Gatland, and I am the admin of the Parental Burnout private Facebook group, which is the only one still yet in English. And this group only began a few months ago, but I found that a lot of you wanted to learn more from other parents. And as you probably all know, parental burnout comes with a type of shame and difficulties to talk about it. So I have actually asked if anyone wanted to talk about it, and beautiful Avril was okay to do an interview with me. So here we are. We have Avril Brown here, and I will let her introduce herself. So can you tell us a little more about you, please, Avril? And thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. So I'm Avril. I'm 42. Our son is now 7.5. We had him, obviously I had him 7.5 years ago, so I was 34 when I had him. And I live in New Zealand, so I'm Irish originally. I left Ireland when I was 21, and I met my husband when I was traveling and moved over to New Zealand to live with him. So I've been here for about 20 years. I was a stay-at-home mom until last year. So I was at home with my son till he started school, and then I went back studying. I have a history in working in mental health and psychology, and this year I set up my own business as a coach.
That's great. Yes, it's really interesting to learn that you were a full-time mother and last year, because yes, full-time mother is a risk for parental burnout. So
yeah.
Yes. Can you tell us more about, so you have one child, is that right?
Yes, we have one child.
Yes, yeah. Okay. And so when did you think you suffered from parental burnout?
Honestly, it was probably not far into when after he was born, into his first year, that I started to really notice myself struggling. I guess our son has always been different. So he's always had high sensory needs. And in his first year, he had a lot of, I don't know, diagnosed as like colic, reflux, all the things, but he pretty much cried and screamed the whole time, and he very rarely slept. So very quickly, I would notice I was depleted of sleep, and I was going back into old stress responses, and I was just feeling that depletion. So it was quite quickly, but I guess it was probably when he was 3 that I really noticed, 2.5, 3, when I really noticed everything was falling apart for me. Yeah.
Yes, but at that time, the term parental burnout was not used. So what did you think it was?
The term burnout was never used. So initially, my doctor said it was anxiety. So it was like, oh, well, you're just anxious, and this is why, this is kind of why your child isn't sleeping. But also, it was like my anxiety, and then it was that I wasn't getting enough sleep, and then different practitioners or doctors diagnosed me with like adrenal fatigue, mitochondrial dysfunction, like a adrenal crash. So there was lots of different sort of names given it to nutritional deficiencies. But really it was kind of just, it depended on who I went to as to what label it was given.
Wow. So when did you hear the first time about the term parental burnout?
Just through my own research.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was it this year or earlier than that?
It was earlier than that, yeah.
Okay.
And at that stage, I'd kind of given up caring what label it was as such, because it didn't matter. It was just a whole range of symptoms that I was struggling with, and I needed to get on top of them in order to move forward. The label didn't actually matter too much, because at the end of the day, I was struggling with sleep, I was struggling with brain fog, I was struggling with all these things. And whether it was called burnout or adrenal fatigue or whatever, I still needed to get myself back into a place of balance.
That is so interesting what you say, because yes, I often have people who are both ways. So some people, once they find out the term, it's like a huge relief. They're like, Oh, thank God. Now I know what it is. It is not depression. It is not whatever people have said to them. And this is already a massive step toward feeling better. But I always say to people at the end of the day, we really don't care what it is. If you are unwell, we need to care about you. And we are trying to find solutions. But the good thing is when we have a term, like there is research that can be done and treatment that can be put in place and try to figure out how to make the treatment work with this issue.
And also when you have a term, people stop blaming themselves. So they stop thinking, oh, I'm wrong. There's something wrong with me. I must be doing something bad. And they sort of think, okay, well, there's a reason why this is going on for me, as opposed to I should just do better.
I will just jump in on what you said about adrenaline fatigue. It often happens too because the cortisol level in parental burnout can be quite high. So people can be like, it can look like adrenaline fatigue because their cortisol level is constantly really high. So that's really interesting that you also were diagnosed with that, and that you're not the first one I hear, but that's great because you're explaining really well what other people are feeling. So what were the first signs for you?
The sleep problems were probably the first signs, and irritability, just really irritable. I just didn't have tolerance for the crying and my son's needs. I guess I just didn't have tolerance for those, and definitely brain fog, and sleep problems, and just overall feeling apathetic about life, but especially about parenting, feeling it was just a struggle. It was just a real struggle. And there was the exhaustion, but the exhaustion, I'm not sure when the exhaustion happened. It feels like it was right from when my son was born. It just got worse and worse and worse. So definitely the brain fog, the not really interested in what was going on for him. And just the no pleasure in parenting, I guess. And a big one for me was feeling like I was drowning. So feeling like I was drowning in parenting. It was just really lost, but also like I was drowning and not coping like everybody else that I looked around at was coping.
Yes. Wow, you are very describing really well all the symptoms too. So thank you so much for that. Actually, there is a studies who has just been published today that because the researchers, always the same one, Isabel and Moira in Belgium, they were feeling exactly what you said. First, it was exhaustion, and then it was the two other symptoms more or less at the same time. They are not sure exactly when. But then the second one would probably be loss of pleasure and overwhelming, and distanciation from the children. So still feeling like you love them, but as you said, feeling like you are not really interested anymore in what's happening to them. So they were explaining that, and they were saying that it's great to know that because now almost we can understand as practitioners that when someone is in exhaustion, we can use the prevention tools there before we go to the next steps, because the two next steps, it can be negligence of children just because you're so tired and full of cortisol. So it's great to have the prevention when you're exhausted. But everybody say, are you not exhausted when you're a parent? So what was the difference for you between what you will see in your friend that were probably tired as a parent and stressed as a parent and your feelings?
The difference for me was the exhaustion never went away. And I would see them, say, at the park or talking, or, they'd still go out every now and again and have some joy in their lives. Whereas it didn't feel like I had that anymore.
Yeah.
But it wasn't depression. I knew it wasn't depression because it was, I haven't experienced depression, but I have worked, in the mental health field and worked with a lot of people who had depression, and it wasn't the same, and I was checked many times by my doctor on the, there's an Edinburgh scale for like postnatal depression and stuff. And I never ticked, any of the boxes really. It was different. It was a different feeling. It was just like, overall exhaustion. There was no resources available to have more tolerance for my child, or to have that energy or the joy or anything. There was just just total depletion. There was nothing there for anything spare.
Yes. So have you seen the test for parental burnout or not yet?
No.
So there is a test you can do online. I often say to people, try more to come to me to do the test instead of having the results by yourself. But it's what you said, like the test is saying it's more about a question of how often do you feel exhausted? How often do you feel emotionally distanced with your children? How often do you feel overwhelmed? Is it never? Is it every day? Is it once a month? And as you said, like if it's every day, and there is a few questions, for example, one of them is when you wake up in the morning, are you already feeling tired about the day, about thinking what is going to happen in the day for your parental role? And if it's every day, of course, you're scoring much higher in the test results. So yeah, it's exactly what you say. It's a question of frequency, and that's good that you felt it too, that it was different. And did people around you notice it?
It's quite tricky because around 2.5, we moved to a totally different area. So I guess my husband knew, but he also had his own level of parental depletion. Like I said, our son was tricky. Our son's neurodiverse, so he's always been trickier. And so his needs have always been higher, I guess, than a neurotypical child. So in that respect, we had, during that time, he also had, when he was younger, our son had like debilitating anxiety. So it meant we were very isolated in our home because he couldn't cope with going outside. He couldn't cope with meeting people, with being in busy places, with visiting people's houses and stuff. So we became quite almost like prisoners in our own home for a while. And that was, so I don't know if other people noticed because I wasn't engaging with other people quite so much. Okay, so yes, and your child, sorry, maybe didn't see it too because... No. He was stuck in his own, he had his own stuff going on, Yes, often it's interesting because the children actually say it first. They say, oh, mommy, you're more cranky. Yes, it would have been different for you. But one of the risk factors they found to be in parental burnout is actually to have a child which has more difficulties, the kind of difficulties. So yes, definitely that can also explain why you were in parental burnout when you feel... Yeah, because these kids are more intense and they have more needs, so you're giving to them much more and often getting less back from them. So you're giving, but you're not getting, the smiles, the I love yous, the things that lift a parent up in the tough times. So it's often a lot more giving and a lot less getting, and it just feels a lot more thankless, I think. But I only have one child, so I don't have another one to compare to. Yes, but I think it is for everybody a little the same, but for you it will be even worse, that this feeling of not reward. So you give so much to this identity of being a parent, and you let all your other identities go almost when you become a parent, because the society is requesting us to do this, more or less, even if it's requesting us to also do all the other stuff. But the identity of parenting grow, and you have no reward, which is really hard when you are growing an identity and there is no reward from it. So yes, I often say to people to actually look for the other identities you have and try to find reward in the other identities and try to feel better in other identities, because yes, parenting is definitely one identity when you get very small amount of reward if you do have some it. and then as parents, we can make ourselves feel guilty because we think, we shouldn't be looking for a reward. We should just love our children like unconditionally and take whatever we get. But it's human nature. It's just human to actually feed and to, for us to feel lighter and happier and be like the rewards make us feel good. So it's not, and I just know that for me, I used to almost tell myself off or berate myself because I shouldn't be looking, you know, I thought I shouldn't be looking for something back, but it's also human nature.
It's a fuel in our brain, that's right. Yes, you need dopamine to be able to fuel and give more energy. And if you don't get rewards, you don't have these hormones. And so it's much harder. Yes. Thank you so much. You're explaining really well everything. That's great. I'm sure everybody will love hearing your story. But so how were your children and your partner during that time? Did they, because you were saying you were missing resources because you were feeling a little at home, did you feel like your partner were a great resource for you? Did you feel like you had other resources?
My husband was amazing. Yeah, I wouldn't definitely not be where I am today without him. He's a really wonderful, stable, really, really helpful as well around, you know, he really gets involved in the housework, in playing with our son, getting involved in parenting our son as well. So definitely without him, yeah, I have no idea, you know, how I'd have got through. And our son, I guess it was around that time that our son started to make improvements. We started to work on his journey with a naturopath. And so he started to make significant improvements in stuff like his anxiety and things like that. So that got a bit easier. So then I guess it was around that time that I was able to sort of look at what was going on for me and start, you know, thinking, okay, well, you know, our son is now starting to improve and he's doing well. I need to start looking after myself, because in the back of my mind, I knew that my journey and his were very interconnected, and that we would, if I didn't get myself better, I was never going to be the mum that I wanted to be, because ultimately that's what I felt. I had this one precious child, and I was not the mum that I wanted to be.
Yes. And so did you feel like anything in your personality or in your history were bringing you to be in burnout?
Yeah. So I had anorexia for about 20 years, and I recovered enough before having my son. So I recovered physically to have my son. And then after everything was so tricky within his first year, I started regressing to some of the behaviors again. So I wasn't thinking mentally about restricting, but old behaviors started to slip in. So definitely I hadn't dealt with all of that. And that definitely meant that I was already depleted coming into the situation, and was, hadn't all of that resolved. And yeah, so I guess that was definitely a big factor for me. And also I think, you know, like I have a history of sort of with anorexia, like repressing my emotions. So I wasn't feeling everything emotionally. I hadn't, there was some, you know, trauma in my background, nothing major, but just like stuff that had affected me. I was a very sensitive person. I still am very sensitive. So, you know, just emotional, highly sensitive, deep thinker, deep feeler, that sort of stuff. So I definitely think that impacted me, because everything that went on with our son was more deeply felt than I guess it would have been if somebody had, if they'd just been a cruisier kind of person. So, you know, I tried to fix everything. I was just tried to fix his sleep. I tried to fix his, what was going on for him with his anxiety. I was a really hard trier and a perfectionist. So, you know, trying really hard to do the parenting thing perfectly.
Yes, so it's very interesting, because the course that researchers have put in to treat parental burnout, it goes through perfectionist. So there is a session on that. There is a session on developing emotional competencies. So that's what you said. There is a session on the relationship with the child. Mm-hmm. There is a session on the care team, which you said that was working really well for you. So probably that wouldn't have helped you. But last section, and we haven't touched about that yet, is asking for help. Are you good at that?
I am now, but before this I wasn't, because and at the beginning I wasn't, because I guess I'd never grown up asking. I've seen my mum sacrificing, you know, herself for like, I have 5 sisters, so I saw her sacrificing herself for us and putting us ahead of her. And, you know, there's a societal thing that, you know, to be a good mom, you put your children first, you don't put you first. So I had totally let my stuff, like my self-care, go. My basics I was on top of, but anything else extra, yeah, I wasn't. And I was useless at reaching out for support, because I thought, I guess deep down, I didn't think I was worth it, or I needed it. Maybe things weren't bad enough. I'm not quite sure what, but there's definitely a thing about how much I valued myself to do with reaching out for support.
Yes, to help parents, I often use the image of when you're in the airplane and they ask you to put the oxygen mask first on you before the child. And I often try to say that to the parents: first care about you before you care about your child, which is like, you have to hear it a lot of time. And we really have to say, like exactly what you said, the society really have to change this way to think so people are comfortable doing it. I'm really hoping that in 10, 20 years, this will have changed. I'm hoping actually next year, but I'm thinking in 10, 20 years, this will have changed and we will be able to care about ourselves before the children, because it's quite a new thing. It wasn't always like this. Yes, the last generation did it, but 200 years ago, no way. Be first before the children. So I'm not saying it's like, yeah, there's probably beneficial things that happen because we put children first, but there is also very negative things too. So it's a balance. So as a balance, so yeah, it's good to prioritize children, but prioritize your self-care too, as you said. So yes, how did you try to put strategy in place? Did you just go slowly, or one day did you wake up and just decided that's enough today? As you said, like, my child is caring about his image and his story, so I'm going to care about me from now on, or was it slow?
It wasn't a one day where I woke up and thought it, but I remember that it was kind of gradually, but I also started to approach it like I could tell that physically that I needed to work on my physical side, and obviously really work on getting myself nourished. Because we were working on my son's gut health. And so I was really focused then on the importance of good nourishment. So I knew that I needed to do that to really kick sort of anorexia to the curb and to be finished with it. So I started on the physical, but being the perfectionist that I am, I totally focused on the physical. So it's like, okay, I'm going to heal. I'm going to get myself healed physically. I'm going to do this. I started working with the naturopath. I started doing, eating really, really well. I started focusing on the supplements, but I ended up getting worse, which sounds really ridiculous. It's like, oh my gosh, for the first time in my life, I was healthier physically and better nourished than I'd ever been in my life. But I was ending up, like, I was actually getting worse with, the adrenal fatigue. I was getting worse with exhaustion. I was getting worse with almost panicky. I was getting lots of heart palpitations. So I was getting lots of physical symptoms, even though I should have been better. And I ended up being diagnosed with IBS and a whole load of, other stuff as well, other physical things. So I sort of took a bit of a step back. And at this stage, I was recovered from anorexia. So I recovered from, all the physical symptoms of it. But I thought, I'm in the best physical shape of my life, or should be. And yet everything is still crumbling. And this went on over the space of sort of 6 months to a year of this sort of physical focusing. And then I actually started to take a step back and realize that I was not just a physical body, that there was a holistic approach, and I needed to start looking at all of the reasons beyond the physical as to why everything was going on for me. And that's when I started getting into more of the deeper inner work, sort of trauma work, subconscious reprogramming, lots and lots of really starting to value myself and take care of myself, not just because I knew I needed to eat well, but because I needed to, have that extra long shower. Say to my husband, I want to go out to a meditation group at night, really connecting with people who made me feel like I was thriving from the inside out. And so it was just, so I started focusing on that emotional, working through those repressed emotions and being able to regulate, because I could see that the things my son triggered in me were the things that I had repressed within myself. So, like anger, for instance, he would have these big meltdowns and I would feel myself in a rage. And this was a lot of the time I didn't feel any real emotions, but then it was like I would get this rage and I couldn't understand it because I'd never been brought up with anger, really. So so this was the start of me sort of going into my emotional repression and where I had sort of numbed my emotions all my life. So I started, looking at my emotional health, my mental health, and my spiritual health, and what actually made, what that actually meant for me, where my values were in that way as well. So I realized that it wasn't just one area. I needed to look at myself holistically in order to heal. And that was, like I said, the physical, self-care, getting my own needs met, not just the basic ones of, sleep, food and drink, because we often think that's our needs as moms. But actually, we've got much bigger needs. We've got connection. We need to feel like we're, that we're not just a mom. I guess we need to feel like we're a bigger person beyond that. So, and I needed to do a lot of inner child work. So I did, So I worked through that. I'm still working through it. I'm still peeling back the onion layers, and it's been years. So it's not, yes, the parental burnout stuff is gone, but actually the healing is a much bigger journey for me.
Yes. And so during this healing process, did you had any support specifically on parental burnout, or you had to create your own support and try to figure out because you didn't find someone?
Yeah, I created my own support. So just initially, to do with the physical side, I went to several different practitioners, because they would help me to a certain extent, and then I would get no further and stuff like that. So like a naturopath, a biochemist, nutritionist, and then but they weren't getting any further because it wasn't just a physical thing for me. And then I started, I worked with a my mind's gone a bit blank, somatic experiencing practitioner to work on the trauma work and stuff like that. So and I did a lot of my own work around breath work, meditation, those, anything that was going to help with my nervous system regulation, because actually that was a huge part of it, was nervous system regulation for me as well.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's very interesting. So you had a lot of things that you tried. And what do you think was the one that helped you the most for your parental burnout journey?
Hands down, nervous system regulation.
Yeah, okay. And how did you find about that?
I just researched, because I'm, like I said, perfectionist. So I throw myself into researching. So I just researched everything I could get to do with why I was, why you don't recover. Because at this stage, I was still kind of like, under the guise of it's adrenal fatigue. So why was I not getting better? I couldn't understand why I wasn't getting any better, but I was doing all these things. And so that was around the time that led me to look into trauma work further and look into nervous system regulation, and the impact on that in everything. So that has been probably definitely the biggest thing for me. And the thing that I would say to people to first start off with, because I don't believe you can heal really anything unless your nervous system is regulated. Because physically, if your nervous system, once again, if your cortisol is up here and you're in fight or flight all the time, your brain, you're still in the reptilian part of your brain. You're not actually able to think really clearly and to problem solve and to rationalize things. You're in survival mode. And that's what it was for me all the time. It was survival mode. And when I healed that, then I was able to, like my IBS on colitis, because I actually ended up with a colitis diagnosis as well, that healed as well. I was able to sleep better, the brain fog lifted, everything just started to get better, and I could see a bit more light. There was a bit more light in my day, and because I was regulated, my son was regulating better as well.
Yes, it's amazing. So my last question, because I thank you so much for your time, but I don't want to take too much more of your time. But I can see that you have regulated a lot of things, but the risk factor, some of them are still there. So do you feel like you are out of parental burnout, and are you, if you are out of parental burnout, are you worried about a relapse or not at all?
No, I definitely feel like I'm out of it, and I am definitely not concerned about a relapse at all. Our son is, he still flares. He's still, he's who he is, and he's always going to be that way. But I have come to a much greater acceptance. One other thing I must say, because I think it's really important, is to let go of expectations. I love, this was a huge part of it. It wasn't something specific that I like an actual, thing that I got help with. But once I was able to let go of expectations of myself, of my son, and of what parenting should look like, everything kind of changed. So I no longer expected myself to be able to be this super mom or this, really regulated mom. I just was able to sit with myself where I was. And if I had a wobbly or I wasn't able to meet my son's needs, then coming to that acceptance of myself was really helpful. Also being able to accept him, as he is, because he is who he is, and he's an awesome kid. He's really sensitive like me, and he's an awesome kid. And parenting, it's not anybody else's parenting journey. It's your parenting journey or my parenting journey. And once I was able to let go of those expectations, that was really, really powerful for me. Now I've forgotten what you asked me.
No, I asked if you felt you.
Oh no! So no, I don't feel like I have any concerns about it. I really am very focused on putting myself, on looking after myself. I'm really aware of trigger things, like I make sure I get to bed really early, and that's because I know that I need my sleep. So I really know what my needs are now and know how to get them met. And it's the same with connection with like-minded people. I will make sure that I connect with like-minded people, and I know that I'm a better mom when my needs are met, as opposed to when I used to think that I was the best mom by doing everything for my son. And I'm much better at reaching out for support for him and for me.
Yes, yeah. That's great. Thank you so much. Avril has been also writing some comments in the group, and every time I'm like, yes. Yeah, so if you want to chat with her, anyway, you can chat under the comments section, okay. Or you can also message her directly if you want to be more anonymous. Is that okay with you?
That's perfect.
Yeah, thank you so much for telling us your story, and it's really nice to hear that you feel great and you're not even worried about collapse in your life. Yeah. So this is fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Absolutely. You have a great day.
Thank you.